Okay, moving right along. Before I ask the next question here in the object of devotion, I just want to say a quick word on perception because we're kind of in this world here of 3,000 realms and our Buddha nature and what is Buddha nature and how do I experience it. And I've talked a lot about your path, my path, our paths are all different to access our Buddha nature. And then there is the discussion of Buddha nature in general. And it can be, language is slippery. Um, so there is Buddha nature. Buddha nature, if you need to identify it scientifically, the closest approximation I can come to is the quiescent energy. The moment activity happens in this energy where there are combinatory forces coming together, now we're entering the Nidana. And the Nidana is a meticulously described chain of events that Shakyamuni described in order to explore the nature of samsara. So there's immediately the key thing that happens in that, although it's described as the 12-length causal chain, and it's used to describe life forces in many ways, the basic construct of it is that this is a dissection of what happens in a fraction of an instant. This is the moment in Buddhist parlance, the moment when we, in a sense, break from the quiescent energy, the Buddha nature, if you will, and we begin to instantiate, we begin to identification at its most fundamental level, subatomic level. This is the Nidana. This is the precipitation of samsaric perception. So, if you take that all the way out to a human being, and Buddhism is about, that's why I think this is important to talk about. Buddhism is a science of sorts, of and psychology and a biology of understanding that in this form, this samsaric form of perceptive capacity, we can see from whence we came. The forces that we precipitate from are still extant. We are still in it. We are still of it. And therefore we can manipulate, clarify, clear up our samsaric perceptive filters, not lose them, not get rid of them, but clear them so that we can see through to our lens, our minute lens of that Buddha nature. So my Buddha nature is my lens to that, the Buddha nature, and so is yours. It's very hard to use words to describe this, but put in a simplistic way, it's like when you look up in the night sky. Any of us on the planet Earth, when we look up in the night sky at specific times, will be able to identify certain constellations, arrangements of stars. But those constellations are fabrications of our existence. Those stars are just there. We're making particular constellations of them. And if our planet were magically shifted out of this, not just this solar system, this galaxy, to a completely, 700,000 billion light years across the universe to another location, and we look up into the night sky to try to identify those stars, we may indeed find those stars because they do exist, but their arrangements would be completely different. Whether or not we even would choose to call them constellations, the constellations we might look for would be a completely different set of stars. That doesn't mean the stars changed. That doesn't mean the nature of the entire universe changed. It only means that our perceptive filters, our point of view, quite literally, is different. But looking at those stars in the night sky from that other place would be just as equally amazing and precious, because all of it is the nature. You follow? So there's no, it may sound like there's a break here or a discord, but truly there isn't. It's just a matter of language getting in the way, because in samsara we identify, and any little thing that can distract us from the goal becomes more important than the goal. That's the nature of samsara. This identification habit is what creates our entire existence. Now, Vasubandhu would call that tendencies and conditions. They're inherent in each skandha, in each aspect of the way that we instantiate in our human form in samsara. So there's another core point. Samsara isn't just human. Samsara is the entire condition of the universe. It is a universe of identification. You see how strong this identification is, because it constitutes that very beginning of nidana within the quiescent energy. Does that make sense? So each and every one of us can, with effort and practice, see through our myriad veils of identification, which is where attachments come from, and all the rhetoric that you already know, to a pre-formations clarity. And it's not even necessary, really, that you enter this clarity. The clarity isn't in the quiescence. See how words get in the way? The clarity is knowing that it's there, perceiving it there. That clarity allows you to understand, coming back from it, how all of this works. That is the awakening. That is enlightenment. And this is a very important misunderstanding of early Buddhism, early sects of Buddhism, sometimes called Hinayana, sometimes called the more evolved Hinayana to Theravada, and other forms of Buddhism. They all have great information. They're all the same teachings, but they didn't have the idea that it wasn't a place to go, an alternate reality, that Buddhism is about this reality. But by understanding, penetrating, and opening your mind to the formation of this, you can then, in a sense, kind of back off. Stop being so attached to every single identification in your life. When you do that, you become far less emotional. You're emotionally hooked to every little thing that occurs. And you can begin to perceive others differently, more compassionately. That's Buddhist compassion. It's a deep level of understanding that transcends identities. this is, it's a very difficult concept. Shakyamuni, Nichiren, Tendai, they all said the same. They all repeated this 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 constant set of words about difficult to understand, difficult to believe, because it's something you have to experience. Again, Shakyamuni said it. This really can only be understood or spoken of between Buddhas. In other words, only when you experience it can you then look at somebody else who's experienced it and smile and understand, yeah, the profundity of this is unfathomable. Now, let's describe it to everyone else. It's very difficult. Okay. So, continuing on. Question. You've told us about the sources of this doctrine, the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. Now, what is meant by the observation of the mind? Obviously, another way to circle around to this understanding, but that's the title of this Go Show, right? The object of devotion for experiencing the observation of the mind. Answer. The observation of the mind means to observe one's own mind and to find the 10 worlds within it. This is what is called observing the mind. For example, though we can see the 6 sense organs of other people, we cannot see our own. Only when we look into a clear mirror do we see for the first time that we are endowed with all 6 sense organs. Similarly, various sutras make reference here and there to the 6 paths and the 4 noble worlds that constitute the 10 worlds, but only in the clear mirror of the Lotus Sutra and of the great teacher Tendai's great concentration and insight can one see one's own 10 worlds, 100 worlds, and 1,000 factors, and 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. I'm telling you, these words, they constantly shift between documentation and experience. Documentation and experience. So it can be very confusing. Thus, my sometimes fallible wordage to try to decipher this stuff for you. So this is why I keep exhorting you. Please make comments, make questions. I have some very, very good interlocutors in the comments section, which maybe you can read. That would also be a source for you to understand your practice more and to make additional comments. Not necessarily in those threads, but you know, everything is a source of understanding for this very difficult to understand practice. There's the aspect of this practice that's very simple. Get a Gohanzen, learn how to chant, do Gangyo. I mean, all of those things are very, very easy, within the realm of a child to do. This was Shakyamuni's goal, right? So anyone can do this. But to understand it profoundly can be a very taxing. And that's as it should be, because that is how Buddhism works. The more you question, the more you learn to question, until suddenly answers simply manifest. You finally break through stubbornly held brain identification, attachment concepts. That's called breaking karma. Okay? And it's not easy. And the older we either get better at it or worse at it. But it's our own journey, our own path of experience, right? That's why we each have our own individual paths. I know I make it sound simple, but it's hard work. So I'm trying to encourage you, I hope. Next question. What part of the Lotus Sutra do you refer to, and what section of Tendai's commentaries? Answer. The Expedient Means chapter in Volume 1 of the Lotus Sutra states, it's actually, yeah, Volume 1, but Chapter 2. The Buddha's wish to open the door of Buddha wisdom to all living beings, quote, end quote. This refers to the world of Buddhahood inherent in the 9 worlds. The, quote, lifespan, quote, chapter states, that's the 16th, thus, since I attained Buddhahood, an extremely long period of time has passed. My lifespan is an immeasurable number of asamkhaya kalpas, and during that time I have constantly abided here without ever entering extinction. Good men, originally I practiced the Bodhisattva way, and the lifespan that I acquired then has yet to come to an end, but will last twice the number of years that have already passed. Here the sutra refers to the 9 worlds inherent in Buddhahood. Now see, this is some of the verbiage that can confuse you. You have to understand that 2,700 years ago or so, Shakyamuni was dealing with a a caste system that still exists today. This idea that humans are predestined and encapsulated in different strata of existence. The poor, the irrelevant, the elite, the academic, the merchant, right? We still have those. We have those in the United States, whether we acknowledge it or not. But further, that the vast majority of the population is simply not capable of understanding really anything. Certainly matters of state, social conformities and governance, and those kind of things. So along comes Shakyamuni. He says, all of that's fine for a societal structure, but it's not reality. I mean, each and every one of us has completely the same potential, for example, to be enlightened. It's not a special, it's not governed by the Brahmin class. You don't have to be told what your destiny is. Make your own. It's yours to have or not to have. Yeah, Buddha's life, or Shakyamuni's life, was threatened many, many times, as were other great bodhisattvas, like Nichiren. Systems of power don't like to be challenged. Certainly on the level of your very humanity. No, we own you. You're ours to do with as we please. They don't like it when somebody comes along and goes, bull crap. Right? They're going to resist. So, that's one reality. Another reality is that the people who are culturally inculcated into this system, in other words, they're just used to being serfs. They're used to being slaves. They're used to working 90 years of their lives for pittance until they die. The elites are the elites because it's ordained. I mean, that we still deal with that, right? That's our world. That's the world of identification. It just comes with that as baggage. It doesn't have to, but it does. So when Buddha talks about this stuff, that I attained Buddhahood incalculably, eons ago, that's slippery wordage, because he's very much cognizant of the fact that all of these people that are learning his teaching, that are following him around, see him personally as Buddha-ness. But that's not correct. They call him the Buddha, and that appellation of Buddha slips into biomorphic reality. And then, therefore, they've identified a thing, a human, and said, "You, human, are the source of Buddhahood." So, yeah, I get it. I can have Buddhahood. All I got to do is hang around you. Nope. you totally, you totally missed the point. You shot an arrow at the earth and it went up in the sky because you don't see what you're doing. This is a this is, and I'm going to keep hammering on this because this chapter is about that very thing. And, Nichiren is using quotes and he's trying in his own way to kind of break that insistent identification, but, he's dealing with people from, the 13th century, 1200s. Very devout people, by the way. So, yeah, he takes apart the life experience, the identification in different modes. Bodhisattva practice has been described as the Buddha way in samsaric human identity, the way to live your life as a good human, trying to stay within the constant awareness, awakening of Buddha nature and our precipitation from it, our instantiation from it, of it, while still being in it. But we're still human. We're human. Buddhism is about experiencing this Buddha-ness while in this form. It's so difficult historically for people to get that. That's why it's inherent. It's inherent because it's what we're of. The sutra states, quote, Devadatta will be called a thus come one heavenly king, end quote. This indicates that the world of hell also contains Buddhahood. So in this old language, he's still trying to use it to indicate, because he doesn't want to make the mistake of being interpreted as something other than. Nichiren never said, I'm Buddha. He said he was living Myoho Renge Kyo more and more every day. Because all of these great bodhisattvas try to make a very strong point here, that they're not the source, but that they have experienced the source, and they're desperately trying to communicate that ability, that opportunity to anyone who wants to try to achieve it. And that because they are avid, adamant supporters of this potential, their samsaric instantiation, their identity, is constantly challenged. How can it not be, you might say? Not because they themselves are, imbued with all this negative karma. Karma is something you create. It is created, right? So if you're adamant about breaking down the structures of elitism and control and all of the attendant politics and authoritarianship that goes along with it, just look around the world today. There's no shortage of people who are basking in the privilege of all that stuff. And here's the thing, if you study anything about authoritarianism, you might set up a straw man of sorts and say, well, these are the elite. They're the bad guys. But you have to understand, if the politics of recent years is any indication, that the vast majority of people like not having to be responsible for themselves. They like to have somebody fighting all their battles for them. So authoritarianship also comes from the bottom. A lot of people like that. They feel a sort of sense of security. We don't have to know how to speak English properly. We don't have to, manage all of these finances and this and that and the other. And my opinions, I can just have them and they don't matter. This is all shattering walls of responsibility and identification with uh, passions that are unreasonable. Because he said so, she said so, she said it, therefore I don't have to worry about consequences or reasons or anything. I can just mimetically spout it. And that makes me cool because I'm like her or him. See, authoritarianship it's a vast, complex societal problem. And so when you confront those systems, like as Buddhism does, your resistance comes from everywhere. It's not, you can't just identify an enemy other than authoritarianism itself. So be prepared. In the sutra it says, quote, there were demon daughters, the first named Lamba, so on and so forth. The Buddha said to them, if you can shield and guard those who accept and uphold the mere name of the Lotus Sutra, your merit will be immeasurable. End quote. Thus, the world of hungry spirits contains all the 10 worlds. When the sutra, so see what he's doing there, he's identifying this certain caste of people, these demon daughters. They represent the caste of people, right? If they take it upon themselves to uphold, as I was just saying, this teaching, the idea, in other words, that we're not contained by our identities, that we all can manifest our maximum potential and experience it in this life, even as we are plumbers and teachers and whatever, right? If they can uphold just that idea contained in the title of the sutra, Myoho Renge Kyo, if they can just uphold that, their benefits in life, in this life, are immeasurable. Because it will change deeply their perspective, right? And they will encounter resistance. But what he's saying is the world that they live in contains Buddhahood, the 10 worlds analogy, right? Thus, the world of hungry spirits contains all the 10 worlds. When the sutra speaks of, quote, the dragon girl attaining impartial and correct enlightenment, end quote, it is indicating that the world of animals has the 10 worlds. The sutra says that by listening to one verse or one phrase of the sutra, the Ashura king Balin will attain supreme perfect enlightenment. Thus, the world of Ashuras contains the 10 worlds. The sutra says, quote, if there are persons who for the sake of the Buddha fashion and set up images, then all have attained the Buddha way, end quote. For the sake of the Buddha, not Shakyamuni, but what Shakyamuni represents, Buddha-ness. I know it's tricky, so I'm going to keep trying to clarify this as I read. And I'm sorry if it begins to annoy you, then comment, let me know. But I need to know that you guys are really getting the point of this. You hear Buddha, think of your own. Not your own Buddha, like it's a teddy bear you go to sleep with. your own Buddha-ness. This is what you chant for from Guanzin, to awaken your Buddha-ness. meaning that the world of human beings contains the 10 worlds. The sutra states that the great heavenly king Brahma and the other deities declared, quote, "We too, in the same way, will surely be able to attain Buddhahood." Here's a challenging statement to Brahmanists. Thus, the world of heavenly beings contains the 10 worlds. The Sutra states, quote, "Shariputra will be able to become a Buddha with the name Flower Glow thus come one," end quote. Thus, the world of voice hearers contains the 10 worlds. The Sutra says, quote, "Those who seek to become Pratyeka Buddhas, monks, and nuns, all press their palms and with reverent minds wish to hear the teaching of perfect endowment," end quote. The teaching of perfect endowment is Myoho Renge Kyo. Myoho Renge Kyo is your Buddha-ness. Thus, the world of Pratyeka Buddhas or cause-awakened ones, has the 10 worlds. The sutra describes the bodhisattvas who emerged from the earth, numerous as dust particles of 1,000 worlds, and who declared, quote, "We ourselves wish to gain this great law, true and pure," end quote. We also want to marry with our Buddha nature, our Buddha-ness. Thus, the world of bodhisattvas contains the 10 worlds. The sutra says, quote, "Sometimes I speak of myself, sometimes of others," end quote. Thus, the world of Buddhahood contains the 10 worlds. Shakyamuni's world of Buddhahood contains the other 10 worlds, its samsaric identity. I mean, it's in the words. You just have to discover what they mean when they say these things. Question: although I can see both my own 6 sense organs and those of others, I cannot see the 10 worlds in myself or others. How can I believe in them? Well, we experience them. Answer: the teacher of the law chapter of the Lotus Sutra says, quote, "This Lotus Sutra is the most difficult to believe and the most difficult to understand." Sound familiar? In describing how difficult it will be to fulfill the teachings of the Lotus Sutra after the Buddha's passing, the Treasure Tower chapter speaks of the 6 difficult and 9 easy acts. The great teacher Tendai states, quote, "Because the theoretical and the essential teachings of the Lotus Sutra contradict all the earlier sutras, they're extremely difficult to believe and difficult to understand." The great teacher Chang'an comments, quote, "The Buddha intended these as his ultimate teachings. How could they ever be easy to understand?" The great teacher Dengyo says, quote, "The Lotus Sutra is the most difficult to believe and to understand because in it the Buddha directly revealed what he had attained. What he, Shakyamuni, had attained." Keep them separate. Those who were born in the days of Shakyamuni Buddha and heard his teachings in person had formed deep karmic bonds with him in past existences, meaning they were all very hungry to learn how they themselves could achieve their Buddha-ness. But they just formed another attachment to a person, Shakyamuni. Not all of them, but this is the general samsaric behavior, right? They identified Buddha-ness as Shakyamuni Buddha. In addition, Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of Teachings, as well as many treasures Buddha, the Buddhas of the 10 directions, who are Shakyamuni's emanations, the countless bodhisattvas of the earth, and the other bodhisattvas such as Manjushri and Maitreya, aided them and encouraged them to believe. But even then, there were those who failed to take resolute mind and conviction. 5,000 people left the assembly, arrogantly thinking that they had understood what they had not. These people who left the assembly in the Lotus Sutra, they weren't just casual believers either. They were arhats. They were deep into the early teachings of Buddha, right? The Hinayana texts. All human and heavenly beings, other than those already present in the assembly, and actually what that refers to, I'll go back to those 5,000 that left. That's pre-Mahayana in general. Were moved to other worlds. How much more difficult it was to believe in the Lotus Sutra after the Buddha's passing in the former and middle days of the law, and even more difficult it is now at the beginning of the latter day of the law. If it were easy for you to believe in, it would not be the Buddha's correct teaching. Ipso facto. Question. The passages from the Lotus Sutra and the explanations by Tendai, Chang'an, and others that you have cited are free from obscurities and doubtful points. But you seem to be saying that fire is water, or that black is white. Although they are the teachings of the Buddha, I find it difficult to accept them. Now, I look repeatedly at people's faces, but I see only the human world. I do not see the other worlds. And the same is true when I look at my own face. How am I to believe in the 10 worlds? So this is this identification problem, right? If I'm in the world of hell, why don't I see hell? See, we're trying to identify something outside ourselves as hell. But look in the mirror. If you're in the world of hell, you're going to see it in your face. You're going to see it in your body, in your posture, in your mind. That's where hell is. That's what these worlds are. They're experiences that we navigate through constantly, moment to moment. So this question obviates that the questioner hasn't differentiated identification from experience. That's a core samsaric problem, right? Answer. When we look from time to time at a person's face, we find him or her sometimes joyful, sometimes enraged, and sometimes calm. At times greed appears in a person's face. At times foolishness, and at times perversity. Rage is the world of hell. Greed is that of hungry spirits. Foolishness is that of animals. Perversity is that of asuras. Joy is that of heaven. And calmness is that of human beings. These worlds, the six paths, are all present in the physical appearance of the person's face. The remaining 4 noble worlds are hidden and dormant and do not appear in the face, but if we search carefully, we can tell that they are there. Learning, realization, bodhisattva intent, Buddhahood. Question. Although I'm not entirely certain about the 6 paths, it would appear from what you have said that we possess them. But what about the 4 noble worlds that we cannot be seen at all? No stone unturned, right? Okay. Answer. Earlier you doubted that the 6 lower worlds exist within the human world, but when I illustrated the point through an analogy, you understood. Perhaps it will be the same with the 4 noble worlds. I will try to employ reasoning to explain a bit about the matter. The fact that all things in this world are transient is perfectly clear to us, right? Things come into being and then fade away. All things. Is this not because the worlds of the 2 vehicles are present in the human world, learning and realization? Even a heartless villain loves his wife and children. He too has a portion of the bodhisattva world within him. He wants to help his children, his wife. Buddhahood is the most difficult to demonstrate, but since you possess the other 9 worlds, you should believe that you have Buddhahood as well, because it is inherent in all of them. Do not permit yourself to have doubt. Expounding on the human world, the Lotus Sutra says, quote, the Buddhas wish to open the door of Buddha wisdom to all living beings. So, end quote. So what's this Buddha wisdom? Why the new word wisdom instead of nature, or as I was saying, Buddha-ness? This should indicate to you, when he says the door of Buddha wisdom, this is a specific reference to your path to Buddha-ness. My path, her path, their path. It's as I've said many times, our paths are all distinct. We are, if you want, innumerable manifestations from this quiescent energy. We can all perceive this function of this process of life from quiescence to our present day. That is our wisdom. That wisdom can only be had in this state of tendencies and conditions. The quiescent energy has no wisdom. The wisdom comes from understanding that point from Nidana to today. That's the Buddha wisdom. Why Buddha wisdom? Because it is the wisdom that takes you to your Buddha-ness. The Nirvana Sutra states, quote, those who study the teachings of the great vehicle, though they have the eyes of ordinary beings, are said to have the eyes of the Buddha. It should be making sense to you now. That ordinary people born in the latter age can believe in the Lotus Sutra is due to the fact that the world of Buddhahood is present in the human world. It's inherent. It's always. It's like the instantiation of the universe that I talked about many times, like a drop of food coloring going into a vast container of water. The food coloring will disperse until you cannot perceive it anymore. It becomes one with the water. But even as the droplets separate, what is between them? What is in them? What they are of is the water. Those droplets, no matter how fine they become, cannot deny the water they are in. They just have their own perception of it. Question. The Buddha clearly explained that each of the 10 worlds has the same 10 worlds within itself. Nonetheless, I find it difficult to believe that our base hearts could be endowed with the world of Buddhahood. If I cannot believe it, I will become an Ichantika. With your great compassion, please help me believe, and save me from the torture of the Avicii hell. Hell being something we experience in the here and now, right? Answer. And this will be the final answer for this part of this video. You have already seen and heard the sutra passage concerning, quote, the one great reason, end quote, why the Buddhas appear in the world. If you still do not believe, then how can anyone, from Shakyamuni Buddha on down to the 4 ranks of bodhisattvas, or we ordinary people of the latter age, who are at the stage of being a Buddha in theory, save you from disbelief? Nevertheless, I will try to explain. After all, some could not attain enlightenment through the direct teaching of the Buddha, but were able to do so later through the preaching of Ananda and other disciples. People can attain enlightenment in 2 ways: by meeting the Buddha and hearing the Lotus Sutra, or by believing in the Sutra even though they do not meet the Buddha. Even before the advent of the Buddha, some Brahmins in India realized the correct view of life through the four Vedas. Jeff, I hope you're listening. Some Brahmins in India realize the correct view of life through the four Vedas. It's a view of life. In China, before the arrival of Buddhism, some realized the correct view through Taoism and Confucianism. Many bodhisattvas and ordinary people endowed with keen faculties perceived, even before they heard the Lotus Sutra, that Shakyamuni had planted the seeds of Buddhahood within them in the days of the great Buddha, great universal wisdom excellence, or in the far more distant past, when he attained his original enlightenment. In other words, the origins of origins, the quiescent energy. They understood this by hearing the Mahayana Sutras of the Flower Garland, correct and equal, and wisdom periods. They were like the Pratyeka Buddhas, who could perceive the impermanence of life at the sight of scattering blossoms or falling leaves. These, then, are the type of people who gained the way through teachings other than the Lotus Sutra. Don't forget, the purpose of the Lotus Sutra is to be universal for everyone. But many who neither receive the seeds of Buddhahood or form ties with the Buddha in the past existences cling to Hinayana or provisional Mahayana teachings. And even if they are fortunate enough to encounter the Lotus Sutra, they cannot advance beyond their Hinayana or provisional Mahayana views. They are convinced that their own views are correct, and that, as a result, they place the Lotus Sutra on the same level as the Hinayana Sutras, or the provisional Mahayana Sutras, such as the Flower Garland and the Mahabharata. Some even regard the Lotus Sutra as subordinate to these. The Buddhist teachers who preach such views of the Lotus Sutra are inferior to the worthies and sages of Confucianism and Brahmanism. But let us set this matter aside for the moment. Caught himself. The mutual possession of the 10 worlds is as difficult to believe as fire existing in a stone or flowers within a tree, yet under the right conditions, such phenomena actually occur and are believable. To believe that the Buddhahood exists within a human world is the most difficult thing of all, as difficult as believing that fire exists in water or water in fire. Nevertheless, the dragon is said to produce fire from water and water from fire. And although people do not understand why, they believe it when they see it occur. Since you now believe that the human world contains the other 8 worlds, why are you still unable to include the world of Buddhahood? The Chinese sage kings, Yao and Shun, were impartial toward all people. They manifested one aspect of Buddhahood within the human world. Bodhisattva, never disparaging, saw the Buddha in everyone he met, and Prince Siddhartha was a human who became a Buddha. These examples should help you believe. Note, the teaching that follows must be kept in strictest secrecy. So, with that ominous note, we will save that for the next video. Some deep stuff. And I appreciate you not only for viewing and issuing comments and challenges to me. I love you guys for that. You help expand my practice. But I also want to acknowledge your patience at times with me as I'm trying to struggle through ways of making this more inclusive and understandable, even though I'm always fearful that I might just be mucking things up for you. I don't want to do that. That's also one of the reasons I want you to comment, because I want to know if I'm using words, and so those words are fallible, uh, and all of us, I think, say things that when we hear them back later, we think, no, that's not what I was trying to say, right? So I can be guilty of that as well. So keep me on my toes. Thank you for everything that you do. Keep your practice strong, and I'll see you in the next.